It is now my pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker, Mike Papulkas, who many of you will already know. Mike is Director of Health, Safety, Security, and Environment with BGIS and a long-standing member of the Post Advisory Committee. He brings more than 35 years of experience in petroleum system design, management, maintenance, and safety training across Canada. He is joining me today for a fireside chat on hot work safety, where we will discuss some of the key risks associated with this type of work and share a few considerations for reinforcing safe practices in the field. Please join me in welcoming Mike to the stage. Hot work is something almost everyone in this room has done. Why is it still one of the highest risk activities we deal with?
Well, hot work is something that we're not doing all the time, but if you think about not setting up correctly, complacency starts to kick in. And vapors and sparks just don't go hand in hand. The biggest issue is certainly most incidents start very small. Many of us have probably seen a flash fire and get kind of scared about that, but if other people are drawn into that, it could get much bigger and bigger. So it's something that, again, we don't do often, but it's a very, very high-risk task that we have to manage controls on.
Right. For our industry, welding and grinding are probably the most common or obvious tasks involving hot work. But what are some other examples?
Well, you can think about anything around the forecourt, anything around the vent racks, anything around curbs and gutters that are close to the hazardous zone. You can think about anything from cutting concrete and, of course, the rebar underneath that. You can think about boreholes. You can think about excavating, where anytime there's a spark in a hazardous environment, you're really now worried about all of those different things. And then if you had to set up your hot zone or hot works in a hazardous zone, you can't even bring in engines or gas-fired engines because they could spark. Diesel, if there's a diesel generator, you want to make sure that the diesel truck or the vehicle doesn't start running high because of the fuel vapors that start into that, and get a truck that runs away or an engine that runs away. So you want to make sure that any engine or machine is outside of the hazardous zone when you're setting up your area.
And you've been very clear and in the article that non-sparking tools aren't safe tools. And why is that?
Well, they're safer than they should be. They're probably 3 times as expensive as your regular tools. However, anytime you're smashing or trying to free up a loose bolt or a very tight bolt, you could have friction, you could have different alloys that have rust on them interacting with each other. I was just mentioning to you, I just got into the series Landman. I don't know if everybody's seen that. I'm very late to it. I just saw the first one. But in the very last scene sort of thing at the end of the very first episode, they have a blowout where they're hammering on a pipe wrench and just continuing to force it, friction, and cause a spark, and all of a sudden, with the hazardous zone there, 3 people died instantaneously. So it's those kind of things that you want to make sure. Friction, thermite reactions, where you're really reefing on a stuck bolt, can also cause heat, and it's not necessarily the spark, but that's why non-sparking tools are better, but they're not always the be-all and end-all.
You can't rely on them 100%.
Cannot rely on them 100%.
We, in Post, we define it clearly that no hot work can begin unless the lower explosive limit, or LEL, reads 0%. So why is that important?
Well, we debated this at length.
Yes.
I think there's some places that say 5%, some places say 0. We decided on 0 because there's too many other factors that can come into play, where you've got humidity, you've got different vapors coming in from different areas. It's not a one-time test, it's a continuous test that you want to make sure, but as soon as you're going into something where you're going to start hot works, you want to make sure that there's absolutely no LELs. Yeah. And then you would have to put in other measures like ventilation, or making sure that you're taking away all of the vapors that has nothing nothing there to start with before you start.
And you've also mentioned before starting any hot work, we can reduce the risk first. And so what are some of the, you talked about the hierarchy of controls.
Right. And hierarchy of controls comes into place where whatever we're doing. If you can eliminate it first, you want to be doing that. If you don't necessarily have to do hot works in a hazardous zone, if you can do hot works around the back of the building or in the landscaped area, that would be your first choice, not to start that. But certainly if you could relocate it, if you could use substitution, if you can, instead of using a diamond cutting saw, maybe you're using water cutting saw, or you're using a crimping tool instead, where again you're trying to eliminate the spark or eliminate the start of something that would catch the vapors on fire. And controls, of course, if hot work is unavoidable, then of course you want to make sure that you've got all the controls in place. And starting with setting up your area very well, your permit to work, of course, you want to make sure that everybody understands what they're doing. But certainly the hierarchy of controls is something that you want to have in place and always thinking about, can we do this somehow differently?
You've also talked about kind of good prep for before starting the work. Can you walk us through that?
The preparation comes with, again, having the kickoff call where everybody's involved, everybody understands what their JSA is all about. I like to say, how do you bake the cake? So step by step, what are the risks? What are the hazards? What are the controls that you want to have in place? At a retail station, of course, the start is, are you going to continue to allow customers to refuel? That's the biggest risk that we come across. If we close the stations, that's great, but you still have the hazardous zone. But adding that customer interaction and anything that could happen at the customer's interaction, pinhole in their tank or broken nozzle or something like that, now you've got vapors coming towards your area. So starting with, if you're going to allow customers to refuel, for Shell we say 15 meters, but 3 meters if you're controlling the vapors, if you have a vapor control. So you want to make sure you have that, but certainly you need to understand where you're working. Are you working around the vent racks? Because the gasoline fuel vapors are heavier than air, and they're going to be congregating around the bottom of the vents. But certainly you want to make sure that you've got a qualified gas tester that does the bump test, make sure that your gas meter is actually calibrated, but also bump tested for that day. So it's ready to use. Right. You also want to make sure that you've isolated and you're doing your post-barricading. Again, keeping customers out, keeping anybody that doesn't belong there out of that area. You want to be locking out and tagging out all the different energies. We often say lockout, tagout is the electrical, and the electricians have already done their thing, but we also need to think about hydraulic, gravitational, thermal, any kind of energies. We want to make sure that we're locking out and tagging out those. You want to make sure that the hole watch or the person that's supposed to be there to be the rescuer, to be the fire watch, has not gone to Home Depot to get the tool that you need, or to Tim Hortons to get coffees for the crew. They need to be there. They need to be part of it. We need to make sure that we understand the rescue plan. We also ask for our contractors to check about burns trauma. With COVID and the conglomeration of hospitals, we want to make sure that if you're going to that local clinic or that local hospital as your route, your hospital route, that they can treat a burns trauma, because we want to take care of our friend that just got burned and has been sent to the hospital. So the qualified fire extinguisher, and not the ones on the columns, those are for the customers. We ask our contractors to please bring a charged fire extinguisher and have it handy. And certainly the fire watch is the person that needs to be in control.
Kind of one thing that you noted was to make sure that you're not skipping the retests, and if you guys if they take a break or their lunch break, when you come back, to make sure you do your retest. So don't rely on something you've done an hour before.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Many incidents, and I'm aware of many across the globe at Shell, where the crew has done their work in the morning, they go to lunch, don't do the initial retest, and all of a sudden you get a spark and somebody's died inside a tank. That was one that I can remember, was a guy that was 3 weeks away from his 65th birthday and retirement, and unfortunately blew himself up in a tank. So it's very important to retest and continuously monitor as well. So don't take a break and then take a break from testing. You need to restart again.
Yeah.
And you might need to reissue a permit as well if things have changed
Right.
that
So
drastically.
reassess.
To reassess.
If you've taken an extended or, enough time has passed,
Yes.
make sure you reassess everything.
Especially in the middle of summer when it's humid and wind patterns change and those kind of things, you need to really reassess that.
Yeah, exactly. So if everyone remembers just 3 things about hot work, what should they be?
Certainly control the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
control the whole situation, and understand that you need to, again, set up, reassess, make sure that all the controls that you want to have in place are in place and checked. Never rush the prep. There's a lot of times I've seen, not here in Canada, of course, but where only the permit issuer knows what's going on, hasn't talked to the crew at all. The JSA is sitting on their dashboard, and they're sitting in their vehicle in the air conditioning, where the crew is involved in the work, but they have not been involved in all the discussion before the work. So never rush the prep, and stop if there's changes, and reassess, like we just mentioned. We want to make sure we have that. Hot work isn't dangerous because it's complicated. It's really dangerous because it's not treated with the importance that it needs to be treated with.
I just wanted to thank Mike for joining me today. Mike is someone that I go to often for advice, and he's always generous with his time and expertise. He's also become my go-to for videos and presentations because he's just so good at explaining things in a way that I think people connect with. So, Mike, thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.